Bang. Welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey, on a sweaty fucking day up here in Vermont. Boy, oh boy. We got another good one for you today. I say it every time, but it just keeps getting better, guys. I do want a couple shout outs real quick. I just want to thank Danny Carson for being here last time. Danny, if you're listening, man, fantastic interview. He was a former True Leave employee who worked in Holyoke, where Lorna McMurray. Whoa, I took myself out there. Sorry. Yeah, Danny, great interview. Couple random shout outs. Someone gave me a fucking joint of this earlier today. First Chair Farms. First time I tried that. Some local Vermont growers here. Really nice stuff, guys. I got to give it up for you. Also, shameless shout out to Jack Nickel at Ojo Rojo for hooking me up with this grinder. I just lost my space case that I've had for 15 years, and I was very sad, and Jack set me up with a new grinder, man. Thanks. What else we got? Is there any more? Oh, I got a little bit of CBD hash here from the Rogers boys from last year. John, I love these fucking guys. And shout out to Christian down at Ratsu's at Wilmington. I still got to get you on, Christian. As soon as my license is unsuspended, we're gonna do it. And that's all I got. So we're gonna dive right into it. Let's bring out my guest for tonight. Wham bam. It's Devon Ledford, the owner of 14 Parishes in Baltimore, Maryland. Bang. Devon, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hey, hi, Caleb. How are you, man? Everything well?
Aside from this heat, man, I'm sweating my tits off. But yeah, things are going pretty well.
Yeah, well, it's kind of humid here as well, man. Maryland is known for having that kind of crazy weather. I'm thinking maybe we'll have a thunderstorm, possibly. Then again, maybe not. You just never know here.
You guys got any of that Canadian wildfire smoke?
We've had that all week long. We had a bunch of rain this week, and so far it's not quite as bad as it has been the last couple of days. But it's yeah. Short answer is yes. We've had more than our share.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird summer.
Yeah, and conflating the environmental factors with having contracted COVID last week and being asthmatic, man, the whole thing is just so much fun.
You got the COVID?
So yeah. I got it a couple of weeks ago. I may have gotten it at a hockey tournament, but it was interesting. It's really interesting. It wasn't bad because I've been triple vaxxed, and then I fell back on cannabis to mitigate the flu pain symptoms. Boy, was it wonderful.
Hey, testify. Hey, before we get into anything serious, I was wondering if you would join me in this little segment. It's called 5-Minute Life Story.
Absolutely. My name is Devon Ledford. I'm married, father of one, sitting here with my best friend. That's my stand-up poodle, Pierre. We emigrated here from Jamaica back in the early 70s. My mother, father, my younger brother, and myself. Maybe I would like to say maybe 72, because I would kind of recall getting here at the age of 5-ish. Somehow we made our way to Maryland. I ended up going to middle school, early elementary school, and high school here. Went to University of Maryland, College Park. Actually, I went to Cornell for a semester before that, and it was just too cold and not enough scholarship money to stay there. So I came back home, went to Maryland, College Park, and studied accounting, business, and transferred to University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where I fell in love with what I figured was what I was supposed to destined to do for the balance of my life, which was biochemistry. I studied biochemistry and found that I was really naturally good at it. And I left UMBC and formed a company, Specialized Home Care, back in early 1990s, actually. We were like one of the first companies here that actually created assisted living for seniors. I sort of recognized that there was space because Maryland was closing their state-run hospitals, and the residents there would need some assistance to bridge the monotonous and routine existence of living in state hospitals into moving into a community-based setting, and we were there first, among the first to enter that space, and I was there for roughly 25-ish years. So my most of my life I've been self-employed, and I've loved it, calling the shots. But the thing is, you only get out what you put in. If you're not willing to work hard and make sacrifices and give of yourself and time, you're not going to get anything out of being self-employed. I was willing to make those sacrifices, and to the extent that my wife allowed me to get out there and work and push as hard as I have, man, it's absolutely wonderful. I've loved it, and I figured that I would do it again, but this time in the space of cannabis, and that's where Clarence Thomas comes in. Had he not made the pronouncement on um, the cannabis laws in the country being all over the map, and he wanted to do something to sort of make them more uniform. And this was shortly after the 2018 Farm Bill. And as fate would have it, I was on my way to Jamaica to see my father, who was sick at the time, right? So I'm there in Jamaica, I'm talking to my dad, and I'm like, man, Pops, I'm really thinking of getting into this cannabis thing. And I looked at him and I anticipated that he was going to say, son, that's not something you want to do. And but to my surprise, he looked at me and said, man, that's a damn good idea. And that caught me totally, totally off guard, because my old man's he's a conservative old, Jamaican dude. And and to the extent that he was able to help, he put me in contact with some people who have a little bit of stroke there. And from there, I was able to make the right connections to cultivators, farmers, and they hooked me up with their exporter, and I found a customs broker here, and everything is set up to do business, except it's still a federal crime, and that's where I am.
Now, when was
5
this that
minutes.
you had? What? Yeah, that was almost, dude. You went over by about 30 seconds, but sometimes we do a half-hour live story. I don't care.
My bad.
I let you go as
What's up,
long as
man?
you want. It was just a catchy title, It's when was that conversation you had with your dad? How long ago was that? Where you were like, I'm gonna into the weed game.
Wow, maybe 20 Farm Bill was in 2018. So maybe 2019.
Okay.
2019, yeah. And because he was sick, it may have been 2018. I would have to check my frequent flyer miles. But
Ballpark, it's fine.
yeah, it's 2018, 2019, somewhere in that year range. And yeah, I went to see him, and he was just getting over something, prostate cancer, and he was using cannabis to treat his prostate cancer.
Damn.
So it sort of caught me by surprise that my dad would say, that would give me his blessings, not only his blessings, but put his shoulder into assisting me to meet the right people. And yeah.
Were you nervous when you pitched it to him?
Well, I'm gonna have to say this is my dad, and so speaking to my dad about cannabis isn't something that I would ever have projected myself to be doing. So the short answer is yes. I was nervous, and but he is such a great guy, and well, was such a wonderful guy, and big heart, massively influential in his community. So yeah, it did sort of press on those strings a bit. But yes, I was to answer your question. Yeah, I was.
Hmm. And now, why Baltimore? What kind of draws you to Baltimore?
Well, when we were younger, Baltimore had a really massive and influential Jamaican community. We still have Carnival here, and my parents settled here after making their way through New York City, and I think my dad got a gig at Bethlehem Steel at the time. I think he was working the steel mill, and my mom studied at Baltimore City Community College to become a nurse, and Baltimore City just became our home. It just became where we settled and where we stayed. Uh, I love it here. it gets a trash reputation from the success of The Wire, which was, yes,
Yeah.
wildly influential to the way that people see Baltimore City. But the little known secret of The Wire is that the characters in The Wire, they weren't all from Baltimore. A lot of the stuff that you see there, you have to really know the history of the time. But a lot of people and a lot of the things that happened there were like an amalgam of characters from Washington, D.C., and people from the city of Baltimore and the projects that are no longer here. But it's not just one story. It's a combination of, it's a mishmash of events and people from both the city of Baltimore and the city of DC.
Sounds like there's cops behind you right now. I hear sirens. You're
I
right.
live around 5 minutes away. That's an ambulance actually.
Okay.
I live between, and I just live between like universities, hospitals, and police stations. Those are my closest neighbors.
Damn.
So and restaurants, yeah. So this is a good place to get fat. It's a good place to get sick, and it's a good place to go to school.
Hmm. And now I know we talked about this on the phone a little bit, and Baltimore's a wild city in terms of, there's this documentary, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the Baltimore Police Department, who is basically, if I
The
recall,
Baltimore City's gun trace task force.
sure.
We
Can you
own the
tell us
city.
a little bit about that? Yeah.
Was it we own the city you're talking about?
I don't know, or
I think that's the name of it. I'm not 100% sure.
you start telling the story, and I'll look it up.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that parts of that story unfolded a few minutes away from where I live. Because there's one interaction that took place on Havenwood Road, which sort of feeds into the Northwood Plaza, and they pulled over a guy there, and they planted. Well, I've got to go back to the beginning. We Own the City is a documentary about the Baltimore City Police Force and how a certain unit, the gun trace task force in the city's police force, were behaving unconstitutionally and violating the rights of citizens of the city of Baltimore. They would do stuff like shake down people. They would plant drugs. They would literally plant. I mean, you would think that when people say I didn't do it, you're looking at them like, oh, sure, everyone in prison says that they didn't do it. But actually, these guys were the police force, the gun trace task force. They were in the process of setting people up. They were planting drugs in cars. They were shaking people down for their cash. They were committing armed robberies. They were protecting drug dealers. Man, they were wild. And
wait, sorry, that was the wrong one. Here, I found it. Let me bang. We're gonna pull this up real quick because I have that capability now, and I need to practice. Here, bang. You were right. The one I saw was actually different. The one you're talking about, bang. We own this city.
We Own the City is what I was talking about. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
the other one was the one that I saw was called The Slow Hustle, which was also
I've never heard of that.
It's right in the same vein. It's a killer documentary if you're into being scared shitless by what police are up to. That's another good one right there.
Yeah,
Carry on.
I and no disrespect to the police, because we do need them. However, when you cross from protecting and serving into producing evidence that's unconstitutional and depriving people of their rights, man, you've crossed over into becoming what you're supposed to be protecting citizens against. And it's depressing in a way, because I know officers, and these officers knew these guys. I'm not sure they knew what they were up to, but man, you gotta believe that they knew, or if they didn't know, that's because they basically didn't really want to know. So when it comes to law enforcement, yes, we need them. Yes, they're important. Yes, um, they deserve to be protected. But wow, no, they need to be held accountable when they break the law and step into the other, realm of what law enforcement is. You're either an officer or you're a criminal. When they cross that threshold and become the other, you need to be treated like the other.
Hmm. I know, and some of these crimes that I recall, they were robbing drug dealers and
Not
unmarked
just
cars,
drug dealers,
and
not
planting guns.
just drug dealers,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
that's the important part. You know, you were a drug dealer if they said you were a drug dealer, right? Because they would admit to planting stuff on people.
If you fit the description.
Okay, and like I was saying, one of these incidents happened like 5 or so minutes away. I can walk there because
Wow.
this gentleman pulled into the mall entrance, and to the right of mall entrance there's a gas station, and he pulls into the gas station. Police pull up behind him. They do what they're going to do, tell him to get out of his car and blah blah blah. Next thing you know, he's going to jail for having you know possession of drugs. I don't know which one, but he's going to jail for possession. And later on, these guys confessed that they planted it on him. They confessed that they planted it.
They
So
admitted to it.
they actually admitted to it. They did.
Wow.
So it's a documentary well worth watching. We Own the City, or the one you named. But I read about a lot of what these guys were up to in either the Baltimore Banner or the Sun paper, and it's a scathing indictment of our police force. Can't sugarcoat it and put it any other way.
Yeah, and actually some of them did get indicted as well as the scathing indictment. So that's cool. It's
Yeah,
nice once
right.
in a while they finally, you're like, hey,
I
we've
think they got the entire unit, man. I think they
yeah,
got like all 8 of the guys in the entire unit.
yeah, I remember they wrapped up a bunch of them. Cool. Well, boy.
Yeah.
And so you decided you was going to start a weed company in this.
See,
Tell us about your idea for the 14 parishes and sort of, how you dreamed that up.
yeah, and when you say that you dreamed up a weed company during this time, yeah, it's absolutely insane. And my wife, God bless her, she's like, man, what are you doing? And I'm thinking to myself, this has potential, but it also has potential to go sideways, really, really badly. But God's been on my side, and I've been able to keep the documentation and make the contacts I need to get the documentation I need to show that what I'm doing is legal.
Hmm.
So the idea behind 14 parishes, as I said, I visited my dad and we were discussing, Jamaica. I was telling him before that, people leave Jamaica, but Jamaica never really leaves your heart. Once a yardie, always a yardie. So you're talking about people like, UFC welterweight champion Rocky Edwards. He's Jamaican. Tyson Beckford. He's Jamaican. Our governor, Wes Moore, his mother's Jamaican. So we have this community, and I'm proud to be a part of it. But what I would like to see more of is people here on this end doing things, reaching back, trying to grow industry in Jamaica. And it's a poor island full of people who work hard and who are not strangers to continuing to working hard. And to an extent, like a lot of what they've done in the past has been extracted. You take the raw resource, take it abroad, process it there, pay the people pennies for the dollar for their labor, and the resources stay on this end, but very little goes back to the island. What I projected and what I wanted to
What
do
are some
was,
of those resources that are being extracted, if you don't mind me interrupting there? Sorry.
number one, first and foremost, the island is mineral rich, and it has bauxite, which is something that that's converted into aluminum. So there were American U.S. companies there originally. Now the mining is and excavation is primarily done by the Chinese. So there's a road being built from Kingston, I believe, to Montego Bay, which is the entire which traverses the entire island, which will cut down time on travel tremendously. And it's being funded by the Chinese. No problem with that. But I'm saying, you understand that when you're a small, poor island with resources, and you have to rely on larger companies to come in, you're not going to get the best deal. They're not going to look out for your best interest. They'll do what's good for them.
Yeah,
And when
no,
it's
the
time to pull
Chinese
up,
they're not going into Africa and giving them good deals either, and all those mines.
no way, no way. So you understand that when the deal is over, the deal is over. They're going to pack up. They're going to go home. And it's the irony. This is the last time I was there, Trent. I just want to bring this up. But I remember going up from my dad's house in Mandeville to to Spalding, and one of our relatives was building a property up there. Man, it is fantastic. And on the best day, you can look from his house and you can see the island of Cuba. It's that fantastic. Um, you can see the rain coming, storms coming off the coastline up the hill, up the mountain. Man, it's just a
Oh,
spectacular piece of
that
property.
sounds awesome.
Oh, it's sick. It's beautiful. Um, and we were going up there, and I noticed that as we traveled through the stores, the areas that contain the stores, the majority of the stores were owned by Chinese, and the Chinese people were hiring Jamaicans to do the storefront stuff. But you could tell that the people behind the money, behind the ownership of the enterprises were Asians, and there's no disrespect for that. I'm just pointing out that when you're poor,
Well, no, you want to put a friendly face on someone who looks like they're from there and in the front of the business. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, it's what happens when you're poor, and you have a poor nation. Um, it's easily the resources are easily co-opted by others who come in with investments, and before you know it, you're working for them. Instead of you start out you working side by side with them, and turns out in the end you're working for them. And that's why I entered this industry. My dad was telling me that there are a few years of a couple of generations left of mining, which is Jamaica's number one industry. I'm sorry, tourism is Jamaica's number one industry. Mining is a distant number two. And once mining goes, because if you look at the island, you'll see that there are these great big red chasms that were once probably farmland. And what's going on is the Chinese are coming along, and they're mining up the bauxite, taking it and taking it on these roads and conveyor belts to take it to wherever they're taking it, and from there it goes onto these ships and off to China, where they do whatever they are to toss it into. So the people in Jamaica are making their money by either doing the physical mining themselves or driving the trucks from point A to the conveyor belts, where they unload the contents of the trucks and taking it to the coast to be shipped abroad. So that's it. That's it. And what are they paid for the work that they do? I don't know.
If it's
Unless you
anything,
own a
like
truck,
most of the other mining industries, probably
very
jack
little,
shit.
very little.
Probably
And
just enough to keep you coming back the next day.
my uncle owns a couple of dump trucks, so he's doing pretty well because he's able to afford to purchase. I mean, to pay people to drive for him, so he's doing pretty well. But it doesn't really trickle down to the individuals who are doing the driving and doing the mining and doing all the other hard work.
I've seen
So
some of those. I've seen some of those mines in India, like the sulfur mines, and you'll see the trucks where there's just like 50 guys packed in the back of it. That some of them they'll be hanging off the sides, and then it looks fucking like a brutal way to make a barely eke out a living.
and it is,
Survival.
it does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It really is a tough way to carve out a living for yourself and to provide for a family.
Is
And
there sugar cane down there? Because I got a comment here
not
from Lou.
anymore.
It says
Not.
we
I mean,
burned down the cane fields.
there. Actually, Jamaica was once of if and the thing is, like, I remember driving up from my dad's house to the airport, and on the side of the road you see the remnants of sugarcane. sugarcane fields all along the road, and this is all over the island. You know, you see it everywhere. Um, Signs of Jamaica's past as an agricultural powerhouse. But as I was telling you, you know, because they were so poor, they would have to take these IMF and World Bank loans, which resulted in the decimation of numerous industries to the extent that they would destroy their dairy industry. And believe it or
Yeah,
not, they would,
do that part. I remember you talking about this on the phone, please.
yeah. And Jamaica once had a vibrant and, you know, dairy industry. And, you know, because they had to sign these loans with the IMF and the World Bank, these loans came with riders and stipulations, and part of the stipulation was that Jamaica had to destroy some of its industry. One that was carved out was Jamaica's dairy industry, and there are images online of people, or there are documented images of people destroying their barrels with their cow's milk in them, and this would be done to facilitate the importation of, get this, powdered milk. The United States and other countries in Europe would send powdered milk from their countries to Jamaica for consumption. Make sense of that, especially when, you know, there are cows all over the island. You have massive fields for them to graze on. They could produce all the milk that the island needs, but you're going to force them to take powdered milk from the United States. Make sense of that. I still can, but
Well,
you know,
I
those
can
are
make sense
those are
of that.
traps, man.
That's the reason they do that is because fuck you. That's why. That's, you know, they, boy. And you also said it's maybe they're sort of tearing up the landscape, man. Just like, because I know, like,
I was saying that when I was talking about the mining. You know, mining, man, it's hard on people, and it's also hard on the land. So my dad lives in Manchester, and across from where he lives, there was a mining operation going on, and I can't remember the name of the company, but they were tearing up the land. And what you and it's sad, bro. It really is, man. It just thinking of what I saw the last time I was there, and this is my father's home, his childhood home, where my great grandfather was buried. That land had been disturbed, and his his remains removed and relocated so that the the bauxite reserves under their property could be mined and accessed. So what I was telling you, I went there and to my father's funeral, and the his home, that great big beautiful piece of property that I remember that was just so lush and green with bananas and mango trees and all kind of fruit trees on that property. It was just a big, imagine a big football field, 3, 4 football fields that's just orange dirt, a big hole in the ground in orange dirt. That's what it's
ugh.
been reduced to. And it they're supposed to re resuscitate the land when they're done, but they're not quite done yet. So we'll see
I
how
bet
that
they're
works out,
I bet they're never quite done.
Caleb. And it's just really sad, man, because like my dad's house, it's a beautiful home, you know, and but there's this fine mist of red dirt that's like all over everything, you know, and you know, the rain will capture it and wash it away, but it's still there, you know, just a fine film, like pollen here in the spring.
Sure. I've
Y-
seen some of these other mines where they're mining just like sand or different types of minerals where the people who live close by, they're like, oh, go up in the attic. There's like a film of dust on everything, and we all have
That's what I'm
asthma now.
talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, Caleb. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
That's
And
gotta
you
that's
know,
gotta suck to look at that,
it
huh?
it really does, you know, because although I hadn't been back to that specific area for quite a long time, you know, my memories of that place, man, it was lush. I remember walking back there when I was maybe 6, 7, 8, something, maybe 8ish. We went back there and we walked out in the plantation, my granddad's plantation, and there were nothing but trees, fruit trees, banana trees, plantain trees, ackee trees, just trees all over the place. You couldn't walk 2 feet without bumping into a tree.
That sounds
So
fantastic.
it was, and that's the point I'm trying to make. It was gorgeous. God's earth, God's territory, man. And you go back there now, and it's just like 2, 3 football fields of bone dry red dirt. So you ask, why did I get involved in this crazy, crazy industry? And as I was saying, there's just a couple of decades left of generations left of bauxite mining left. And we've seen what happens, what can happen, during the COVID pandemic. Nobody was traveling to Jamaica, right?
Oh no shit. Yeah.
How many people?
Anywhere. Yeah.
Nobody was traveling, and lots of people started businesses before COVID, and at the end of COVID, dead. Everything's dead. So we've discussed. I discussed to him what he discussed with me, that there was a limited number of a limited amount of bauxite left to be mined, but Jamaica has this history of cultivating cannabis. It's and what I figured was, you have this tradition and the importance of cannabis as a sacrament to an established religion on the island. Because Rastafarians, they don't smoke cannabis for fun; they smoke it as part of the sacrament to their religion. It's incredibly important, and we have some of the best climate on the earth, in my opinion, for cultivating this stuff. If you think about what goes on up in the Blue Mountains, where they cultivate some of the finest coffee in the land, that's also a really sweet spot for cultivating cannabis as well. And there are people doing it up there. And it struck me that there's this massive potential for cultivating some of the world's best cannabis to be exported abroad to the markets in the US and abroad.
And
And
Jamaica, you got that name brand record. When you think of Jamaica,
thank you. You automatically, it conjures up images of cannabis. And
yep.
That's why it sort of made intuitive sense for this connection to take place. I live in Maryland. Maryland has, and as of 2 days ago, we have a new adult use market. Where people can just, you don't have to go and get a medical card. You don't have to deal with the rigmaroles of that. You can just walk into a shop, buy yourself some stuff, and go home and enjoy it. As I said before, our governor, his mother is Jamaican. So the things seem to line up and just make sense. But it's been difficult because the feds just won't act to allow what can happen and what makes sense. To me, it makes sense to me that it's just a combination that has a great deal of potential, great deal of upside.
Yeah.
You think about it, Caleb, the important part to me is, it's not the product, asking people to grow great, we're going to export the cannabis and they get pennies for the cannabis. There's potential on the island to actually process it as well. You can make the oils, it's there. You can make isolate, it's there. You have the potential to do all these things that's being done here. You can do that there as well. So we can add value to the product before it's shipped.
And one thing I recall talking about that it's not on my list yet, but one thing I remember you really harping on was sort of the difference between growing indoor and growing outdoor, or sun grown, or what I think I'm supposed to call it, sun grown now. And Jamaica seems like, I have a buddy out in Hawaii that I interviewed as well, Rusty Tap, if you're listening, and those seem like it would seem almost pointless to grow weed indoors, or wasteful even in an environment like that that's, you know, so perfect for growing?
Okay, that's a very controversial topic. I've gotten into some
Let's
rather
do it.
tight debates about the about sun grown versus indoor grown cannabis. I mean, I can understand why it's done indoors. It makes sense to do it in a place like Colorado indoors. It makes sense to do it in a place like Canada indoors. It makes sense to do it indoors in Vermont. But man, when you get to a place like Jamaica with where the climate is just so ideal for cannabis cultivation, why would you take that indoors? You know, you're robbing the planet of the benefits of cultivating cannabis outdoors. You know, but it grows rapidly. Um, the leaves are fantastic for taking carbon from the atmosphere. The root system, it's great for bioremediation. Growing cannabis outdoors, if if you have a spill of contaminants in your soil, grow some cannabis in that soil, chop that cannabis down, throw it away, and before you know it, your soil is resuscitated. You know, because the cannabis is so good at drawing up contaminants from the environment around it that it's an excellent bioremediator. You don't
Let
get
me
to take
ask
that.
you this though. What do you do with the plants that have soaked up all of these
Oh, you
contaminants?
trash those. That's you
How do
don't
you,
use
what?
those.
Where do you put them? Because I assume it's still, you know, if you take, you know, all that biomass, which has now accumulated all these, whatever. I heard it's really good at sucking like
Bioremediate.
radioactive.
It
Yeah,
it certainly can,
sure.
but
So
that's
like,
not what you.
then you have a plant full of like uranium or something, and like, you know, I've heard some people say, oh, just burn them. Well, now that isn't that going to go into the atmosphere?
You know, that presents a totally different problem, and it presents a problem that you're going to face when like you're facing when you're uh, a nuclear when you're using nuclear energy. What do you do with that nuclear fissile material?
Right,
And
exactly.
there has to be a way to 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 um to manage that material in a way that prevents it from leaching into the environment. And um, I would think that the best thing to do is to store that in facilities above ground. But this isn't the point I was making is that cannabis is good at those things. Now, that's not going to be the cannabis that you cultivate for the cannabis market. That's a
Yeah, sure.
whole different thing. You know,
Right.
you have to make sure that the environment that you're cultivating that stuff in is pristine because cannabis is excellent at what we just said, bioremediation. And you want to ensure that the stuff that you're providing people to consume is not that stuff that you're growing for bioremediation.
Sure.
You grow cannabis for bioremediation in order to grow other crops um, or to grow future crops that have the potential to earn in the market. You know, but that's why it's important to make sure that you have a testing regimen that actually does what it's supposed to do.
A testing regimen. We were going to touch on the testing. You want to do it now since you did my segue for me there?
You know, did I actually answer the question that you had about
I don't know what exactly was the question.
sun grown, sun grown
Oh,
versus
yeah, well, I'm with you. A lot of, here, let me read this comment from Jeff Rawson real quick while I got it here. I've consumed sun-grown cannabis from Vermont that was on par with fine indoor. I imagine that climates like Jamaica's and many parts of California's could also provide great sun-grown cannabis. Thanks for
absolutely
tuning
can.
in.
Hey Jeff, what's up, buddy?
Speaking of testing,
Absolutely, absolutely. He's absolutely right. And you know,
I'm with you. I'm an outdoor guy, man. People give me shit too, but I love smoking outdoor, you know, and
you know what?
I've smoked indoor that looks amazing. And then you put it up to your nose. You're like, oh,
And it's just different. It's
it's
just
not,
different because
it doesn't have that pungent kind of punch you in the face kind of. I mean, some
what
people
what
do.
you saying?
You're wrong. Some
What are
guys
you
do,
saying
but
that outdoors doesn't have that aroma, doesn't have
No,
the.
no, I'm saying indoor. I'm saying sometimes indoor doesn't have that terpene profile, even though it's got the bag appeal. But it's just you look at it and you're like, wow, amazing. Then you smell it and you're like, huh. I kind of thought that would be more stinky.
Bag appeal is a visual aesthetic, is it not?
Yeah, and I personally think it's overrated. Although I try to
Thank you
leave
very
my
much.
opinion on the show.
I've said that in so many occasions, and I've taken flack from it. But it is what it is. I think that a lot of what drives this industry is psychology. People have been told for so long, and they've been told, and they've been shown images in High Times magazines and other sources over the generations that over decades it has promoted the superiority of indoor cannabis. And I mean, look, indoor cannabis is fantastic. It is what it is. It's a great product. The people who are good at growing it are fantastic in growing it. But let's be honest, those those lights you're paying for can't replicate what the sun does naturally. The sun provides spectrums of UV light that we just don't have access to with the very best of these artificial lighting systems that we have now. And um, look, people say that it's not scientific research. Hey, I get why you want to say that, but listen, I'm for putting up sun-grown cannabis against indoor-grown cannabis and having people judge for themselves blindly which is which. And I'm pretty sure people are going to come away surprised that they're going to find that the
That's
sun-grown
that's
stuff
how you
is
gotta do
grit.
it.
It's
Blindfold them,
look,
and that's the only way to find out.
people are going to be surprised, man. It's just I'm not going to say it's better because I've always said the better is quantifiable. Better is cannabis with, to me, a broader terpene profile, a broader cannabinoid profile, something that's not too heavy on any one cannabinoid, and tries to balance the full panoply of potential products that are available to the plant to be produced.
Wow, that
That
was a
to
lot
me is
of
better.
alliteration right there. Nice alliteration. Fuck yeah.
Thank
It's also
you,
cheaper
man.
or at least it's less resource intensive.
Intensive.
The electric
Absolutely.
bills in these indoor places are through the roof.
And people say that that and this is a conversation I've had with someone I respect tremendously, and I love the guy. But we will not agree on this because yes, indoor grown cannabis costs more. It's going to cost more because it cannot match sun grown cannabis at the price point because you're not using the the energy inputs and to provide that plant with the energy to grow. You know, so it does cost more, but it's worth it.
Hmm.
That's the question that we need to find out. I, I listen. I stand by this. I think sun-grown cannabis is where this industry is eventually going to end up going.
I'm not gonna complain about it. I do like
I,
smoking indoors. I don't want to give the impression that I don't
look,
because I know some dudes that grow some absolute chronic in there, and I
I'm
love
telling
it.
you, there are guys who are really fantastic at what they do. I no shade, no disrespect to them,
Yeah, I
but
don't discriminate against my weeds really,
no,
unless it's swag.
yeah, I just happen to think that and I could be wrong, but I just happen to believe that the future of cannabis is going to be it's going to be indoors, and I mean, sorry, not indoors, but sun grown, um, and I'm hopeful that places like Jamaica and the other islands of the Caribbean, with the perfect atmosphere and climate and workforce to pull this off, can actually get it done. Because there are people there who have been growing this stuff. I met a farmer there, this gentleman named Mr. McKenzie, Great guy. Grows up in the hills of Port Antonio, Blue Mountains. His father grew cannabis. His father's father grew cannabis. This guy is the third generation cannabis cultivator, and he's the first to do it legally. That's amazing. So
Hell yeah.
that's the kind of, that's what I'm trying to support. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to support back on the island. And it's not just the ag sector, but it's also the processing and the creation of value added products. That's where I want this to go, Trent. It's not just about cultivating cannabis and exporting it and importing it. I want Jamaican industry to benefit from their expertise at growing this product. So I basically see myself as a middleman / ambassador for Jamaican cannabis. If I never make $1 off of this, man, I'm good. The thing for me is I want the island to benefit. I want the people back there to say that that my labor, my work isn't going in vain, and that I'm actually contributing to international GDP.
Fuck yeah.
I would love to see that, man. That's what I want to see. That's why I'm in this.
I got a couple comments here. We got Lou Rinaldi. I think he must have fallen asleep for this part, but love to hear Devon's thoughts on the notion of terroir as related to sun-grown cannabis. And I think we were just kind of touching on that a little bit, just the different sort of terpene profiles and cannabinoid profiles you get from growing outdoors,
Yeah, recently, Daniel Garner, shout out, basically just provided an article or a conversation on Facebook that said exactly what I was touching upon. The terpene and cannabinoid profile for sun-grown cannabis. Just, I hate to say better, but it's more.
That's the second. That's the second
it's more.
You hate to say
it's
better.
It's more complete. It's more complete than.
Oh, he meant from. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, finish up.
It's
got a couple more.
It's more complete than indoor. Is that what? Not we're am I not discussing what you're talking about?
No,
Lou?
I fucked up. That was my bad. Lou said I meant from one outdoor location to another.
Absolutely spot on and true, man. That is so true. That is so true.
Sorry, I dropped the ball.
That is such an important point. And it's not just what you grow, and it's not just how you grow, but the soil plays such an important role in what you get from your cannabis. And not just the soil itself, but the elevation also plays an important role. Like if you grow cannabis at sea level in the same soil, you'll get a different thing than if you were to grow it at 5,000 feet elevation. You know what I mean? You're going to get a totally different product. And elevation produces, in my opinion, that's the pinnacle of cannabis. The stuff that you grow up on the side of mountains in fertile, rich soil. That's the best stuff. And that's why I'm such a fan of what Mr. McKenzie's doing up in the Blue Mountains. He's growing in the same area, not the same area, but geographically, it's the very same location and the same sort of soil range that produces Blue Mountain coffee. It's perfect for growing cannabis. And up there, the environment up there, it's Jamaica has so many different microclimates. Like in Mandeville, it's dry. You don't get a lot of water there. Don't get a lot of rain. But a couple of miles to the north and east, you have Portland, and it rains there a lot. It's perfect. You have the ideal climate. It's shady. It's green. It's elevated. It's perfect for growing cannabis.
Here we go. We got one more.
You grow it in Westmoreland, you get a different thing. You grow it in Portland, get a different thing. You grow it in Spalding, you get a different thing. So yes, terroir means a lot, man.
Oh yeah. I got one more from Jeff Ross in here. He said that's the thing, the precise point. Indoor will always be more expensive. Sun-grown and indoor are quote unquote different, but the best sun-grown is on the same level as the best indoor. Sun-grown will win. Watch out, California will flood the U.S. and Jamaica will be a great power. Jeff's predicting the future. And here we got one more from Lou.
Jeff, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you.
Word up. And we got one more from Lou here. The broader environmental impact of large-scale commercial indoor grows is concerning.
Lou, I've said the same thing on so many occasions. And I think I've even coined a bloody phrase for it. I said you're converting a green, you're browning a otherwise green activity.
Yes.
Cannabis cultivation by itself, cannabis cultivation is an incredibly potentially green activity. It's fantastic for the planet. It's fantastic for the environment. It's fantastic for the soil. But man, when you take it indoors and you have to feed it up with all these artificial lights, then you have to do this special thing with humidity. Then you have to do this special thing to keep the temperature regulated. Yes, you're there's a lot of control there, but my goodness, the energy costs are just astronomical. And I think, man, you're you know there I think about what happening to to um to the cannabis industry in Canada and Canopy and what's going on there now. Um,
Yeah. Or what about Tilray? You mentioned them on the phone too.
there's no way those guys are going to survive. There's no way. Um, and
I
it has far more to do with hemorrhaging money producing cannabis, and those guys don't even have the best growers. They should come here and raid us for growers. Guys like Trent, he'd go up there and turn the show around, but they don't know what they're doing. And cultivating cannabis indoors, it gives you a lot of control, but it's just so expensive. It's so environmentally unfriendly, and it's so costly. You're not going to be able to compete in the future when people realize that you're paying more for a product that's not substantially even um, or even better. That word again. It's just it's you're not getting what you paid for.
the
You can
price tag
you can
price tag implies that it's better, but
and
yeah, I'm
that's
yep.
Caleb. Again, much of what drives this industry is what? Psychology. People believe that it's better because it costs more,
Yeah,
and they're
paying
willing to pay.
$75 for cookies eighths out in Las Vegas. I took 2
Thank
hits
you.
of that. This kid had a joint. He was like, "It's a $75 eighth from cookies." I was like, "Hey, can I hit it?" And he let me hit it twice. I was like, "Yeah, tastes like $50 weed."
Caleb, yeah, I've said it before, brother. I mean, there's so much psychology in this industry that needs to be unpacked, and platforms like yours allow people to come on and give their opinion, um, and hopefully these opinions change the way people view these products. Hopefully,
Yeah, and I mean, oh, you know what I wanted to circle back on real quick was you were talking about soil quality and stuff, and I wanted to ask you about because you mentioned some of these big corporate Tilray trying to make some investments down there.
they
Do
tried.
you have
They
do you
did.
have any of
They
those
did.
big do you have any of those big ag companies also like trying to sneak in Cargill or Monsanto or any of those ske-
Not
sketchy
that
people?
I've heard of. I haven't heard of that, but I'm telling you, I think I shared something some time ago where a company that is Arius Arius or something like that, a company that was owned by Tilray, um, purchased uh, um, uh, like a storefront, a vacant property front, and I think they even inflated the cost of it, um, because they were trying to give the impression that they were making investments into the cannabis space in Jamaica. Turns out it was just a mechanism for them to inflate the value of their stocks. So, if you can't make it, you fake it. And if you can't fake it, you inflate your stocks and engage in some good old fashioned pump and dump fraud.
Hey, and there,
Hey,
boy, it seems like there's a lot of that going on. Is it
and
Afria? Is that the name of the company?
that's the
Afria?
company. That's the company. That's it. That's it. They're affiliated with Tilray, right?
Yeah, Tilray and Afria announced closing a transaction that creates a new Tilray, a global
Yeah,
cannabis leader. This was in May 2021.
yeah. Afria,
Uh,
that's the company.
I don't have I, I'm
Shenanigans.
I don't have a Jamie like Joe Rogan does, so I have to pull everything up myself.
Yeah,
But
there's definitely a bunch of shenanigans there, man.
and I did want to circle back too because I mentioned the lab testing thing, and there's been a lot of shenanigans there as well. And as well as I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on sort of this trend that we're seeing where potency results are um,
Inflated.
driving the prices of cannabis.
That's just such a wrong-headed move. And you know what? Again, shout out to Daniel. Daniel Ghana. He posted an article recently where that same topic came up, where he shared an article stating that the importance of single molecules are beginning to take a back seat to a more complete cannabinoid profile, um, which includes terpenes. And yes, terpenes are so very important. But as you were saying, that it's difficult for a public to understand, to get, look, cannabis is such an incredibly complex plant. It's going to be very difficult to educate the public, the cannabis consuming public, on all of the compounds that are potentially available. So I can understand why companies would focus on just one or two or maybe three cannabinoids and saying that, you know um, the sign of quality is high levels of X, Y, or Z. But that's not true. And I think the more we get into this and the more, people become educated on what cannabis actually is, they're going to realize that, man, we're looking for more than just THC.
Uh,
Because I remember looking at an article, something from a very well thought of, highly respected cannabis scientist, Dr. Russo, and his article said this: THC is not the number one factor for predicting. THC concentration isn't the number one factor for determining one's experience using cannabis. It's the aromas, terpenes, flavonoids. Which cannabis production method generally results in the greater concentration of terpenes and flavonoids? Sun grown.
Yeah, and I mean,
See where I'm going?
I've smoked some 15s that I liked more than the 30s. Like sometimes it's like for real. If you blindfolded me, I guarantee if we did an indoor outdoor kind of test, I guarantee my nose would gravitate towards some of those more outdoor profiles.
I'm not going to disagree with you. And
We're
this
gonna
is
do it.
no
Actually,
disrespect.
hold
This
up,
is
hold
no
up.
disrespect.
Boom. Lou Rinaldi said, let's do the Pepsi challenge with indoor and sun grown all over the country. Do it right and aggregate the data. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get that done, man. Let's get that done. There are going to be so many upset people, But you think about what you're going up against when you go up against the indoor grown industry. You're not just going up against, it's phrased it that way, but the people who cultivate indoors, they do a fantastic job. Shout out and mad props to them for what they do. But it's expensive, and you when you're cultivating indoors, you need a couple of things. You need people who are going to provide you with the lights. You're going to need people to provide you with the grow mediums. You're going to need people to provide you with the space to convert. You're going to need people who have the knowledge to go in and set that all up. So it's not just an indoor growing industry. It's there are a whole lot of people who would miss out and lose out if what I predict the future of cannabis to be actually, unfolds in that direction. They're going to be a lot, but that's the way business goes, man. There are always going to be winners and losers, always. And the thing is, you've got to know and have an understanding of where the market is trending. I mean, right now people believe, because of the psychology and because of High Times magazine and because cannabis moved indoors, not because it was the better place to grow it, but because you wanted to hide from the man. The man was going to come and raid your stuff and burn your stuff down, chop it down, take it, and throw it away. So
I get that.
you that's why we went and that's why it went indoors. Let's just call it what it is. You know,
Mm.
yeah. And because it went indoors, people realized, man, this does give me a great deal of control. I get more control of the inputs. I get more control of this, that, and the other. But that's costly.
Mm.
You know, and
Yeah, and then sort of what I'd be curious to see is how, because every time a new market opens up, you get a good price for a while, and then you get the price crunch. And I would be
why is
curious.
that?
Well, because it's like
We
you
know
know
why
this.
that is. We
Like
know why that is.
I'd be curious to see a an analysis of who gets hit worse in the crunch, because when you're growing indoors, if you right now, I know guys that were getting over $3,000 a pound the first year here in Vermont. That's cool, but like in 5 years, that might be half that. Who knows, man? And how much of a percentage is it based on, when you get the price crunch? Like, say you're growing an outdoor, and it costs you go from like I don't know, 1,000 a pound to 500, or you're growing indoor and you go from like 3,000 to 15. Who's getting hit the worst? And I imagine, I'm gonna have to guess, it would be like the indoor guys as a percentage of their loss anyway, because the overhead just for growing outdoors is so much less. I imagine you could absorb the crunch a little better, assuming you could find people to still buy your product.
I mean, are you outdoor growers can crunch better? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the outdoor growers could survive that better. Just
I absolutely agree. I absolutely
and
agree.
power's not going to go out or shit like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You do have you're susceptible to weather anomalies, but man, power outages, um, blackouts, um, blizzards, those kind of things, man. They impact your operations when you're a company, when you're a place like Canopy up in Canada. You think if Canopy was getting their cannabis from Jamaica, right, and bringing it to Canada and distributing it from Canada, from Jamaica to Canada, you think they would be in the trouble that they're in now? Their costs would be so much less.
Yeah. Hmm. And
Wouldn't
don't give them any ideas, Devin.
it's too late now, man. They're dead. They're dead.
Yeah, these
And
guys are bleeding. I'm not a big stock market guy, but sometimes I just look at the line, and there's a lot of lines just fucking tanking.
they're dead. And one of the things that confuses me most about this industry is the trending towards vertical integration. I understand the desire to to um to create your own product, to process your own product, and to market your own product, but that's expensive. That's super duper expensive. And I had this notion that a company with Canopy's capital investment, had they embarked on a simple strategy of just concentrating on doing one thing, one thing better than everyone else,
Right. Do
right?
one thing, do it well.
Do one thing great. Where do you think they'd be today? They'd be so
Yeah,
much better off,
they
and they
decided,
would not.
well, let's do a lot of things poorly.
Poorly. And okay,
Every
let's give them the benefit of doubt. Let's do a lot of stuff fairly well. That's not going to cut it. That's not
Sure.
going to cut it, because
Mhm.
you have people you know, um, who have incredible expertise at producing a fine product, right?
Mhm.
They're still there. They're still your competition. So when you
Mhm.
talk about the fact, when those guys complain that um, they're failing because the United States hasn't federalized, come on, man.
The
You've got a
tax.
whole you've
Yeah.
got a whole country there that you've oversupplied. You
Yeah.
have messed it up
Yeah.
so badly. Don't blame your neighbors because they didn't bail you out. And even if they were to, there's competition here that you're not ready to face.
Yeah,
So
where were all
you
these guys bitching about the taxes like before they were implemented? I mean, these guys seem to like these big MSOs, these corporations, the Curaleafs and the Truliefs, they seem to kind of get what they ask for a ton of the time. It seems like maybe they, all of a sudden, well, the taxes are a big burden, which I agree with, but it's like, where the fuck were you like when this was going into legislation in the states around the country? Where was all this
Caleb,
complaining?
those MSOs got a lot of what they wanted. If you think about it, they've managed to create an industry with an incredibly high cost of entry. You've got to have like a lot of money to get into the industry.
Right. And they lobbied against stuff that would have helped other people get in cheaply, like delivery or direct to consumer sales, or they lobbied medical patient rights and shit,
because it didn't suit them.
Right, because it wouldn't drive more people into their dispensaries. That's going to take people out.
Exactly. It didn't benefit them. So they got exactly what they wanted. They wanted high cost of entry. They wanted, so many things that they got. And to say that
what you wish for,
Yeah, exactly. The industry is the way that you guys set it up to be.
Yep.
It's a reflection of the industry that you guys created. It's the legacy guys. They didn't make this.
No,
it's not on them.
Nope.
They're still doing their thing. You know what I mean? You guys blew it,
man. A lot of them were largely ignored. I've watched these people show up to meetings and public comments and just say the same shit over and over and over, and then it just falls on deaf ear. It's like nobody. I've never heard a legacy guy suggest we should have THC caps. Just not a single one. I've never heard anybody in the whole industry. That's just special interest right there. And wow, absolutely. Now you can't make money and you're fucking crying about it.
Yeah.
Well, boo-hoo, here's a tiny violin.
Exactly. Yeah, man, absolutely. You got what you asked for. Now, I mean, you got how many people get to set up the rules, establish the rules for the industry that they're going to guide it? How many people get to build their own playground? Right? Yep. After you've built your playground, man, you've got to go play on the stuff you built. Play on that swing set. Swing on it until it falls apart.
Playgrounds before you get into the playground building business.
I mean, I hate to come across as someone who's but man, it's so many mistakes, man, and because I can see how they could become so enamored and given a false sense of confidence by their billions of dollars of resources. Okay, we have all this money. There's no way we can blow it. No way we can blow it. We're going to go out. We're going to make splashes everywhere. We're going to do everything. We're going to be everything to everyone. And when you do that, what's the end result? You're nothing to nobody. Do one thing well. Concentrate on doing one thing better than
they should have started there.
Even if you don't know how to grow it, find people who do.
Right. And that was another issue. They didn't want to pay for talent. It seems like, and Trent Hancock was someone who seemed to agree with me. They invested more in real estate than people who can keep plants alive or, know how to make them, come out at their maximum potential. They just, we'll buy the real estate. We'll figure that shit out later.
Trent, that guy's an ace in the hole for whoever gets him.
Yeah, I like Trent.
Yeah, he's fantastic. The guy's honest. He's talented.
He's smart too. He's all over that.
Hell yeah, man. That guy's good people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it looks like he's leaving Oregon. I think he said he's leaving Oregon. He's looking for. Hey, come to Vermont, Trent. We'll have you.
Man, everyone respects that guy. I was paying attention to a conversation that someone accused him of actually wanting more testing, and nothing could be further from the truth. What Trent is an advocate for is accurate testing, nothing more. He wants testing that's accurate and reflective of what people are actually purchasing, and who can be against that?
Right. And even everything he talked about from the chain of custody, it's like, it's, and when the testing, to me, it seems like when the testing becomes a for-profit enterprise, it just creates all these perverse incentives for people to cheat.
See, Caleb, and that's something that we've addressed in Jamaica. testing will be done by the government. What you're going to get when you purchase cannabis from Jamaica, you're going to get something that's been grown to GMP standards, and it's going to be tested by the government, not for no for-profit. Testing labs are going to come up there. It's going to be done by, I think, the Bureau of Standards, if my memory serves me correctly. And I've been in conversation with them on how to go about doing this in a way that eliminates much of the problem, many of the problems that we've seen here. And it starts with chain of custody. You cannot allow the grower to select the cannabis sample to give to you for testing. You've got to show up on your own one day.
That seems so common sense, man.
You got to ask yourself, who wrote that law? Who lobbied for that?
Well, I also assume part of it, a piece of it at least, has got to be the state going, wow, we don't have the resource. How much would we have to pay to send people to drive around and pick up all these samples and then do the testing?
You know what?
Even Vermont is actually setting up a third-party lab, I do believe, through the state, a reference lab. So that is kind of cool, to your point.
Figure this out, though. How much money does the government make on licensing and fees, medical licenses? I mean, medical card fees, cultivation licenses, taxes. There's enough. You cannot tell me that there's not enough money in this that the government collects to actually go about doing this properly.
Oh yeah,
you can't tell me that. You can't convince me. It's a slush fund for so many other side projects, but instead of using the resources to make the industry actually better and safer, they're using it to do what? I'm not sure what they're doing with the money, because they're getting a lot of it. Who's the winner? Who's the winner? Who's the winner in cannabis, man? It's the regulators.
It's a few people. It seems like a few people at the top, maybe cash out with some. But yeah, I mean, like, I watch these Twitter groups of investors who are just getting fleeced, and they're all pissed, and everyone's got some excuses. Like, dude, you invested in terrible companies. Absolutely. Run by shitty people who grow a shitty product and treat their employees like shit. Like, what did you expect? And it's federally illegal. Like, that could go wrong. It may be not a great place to put your money right now.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not an investor. I don't know about money.
Invest in a cannabis company.
No, and all the ones the only ones you can invest in are the big MSOs, because they're the only ones that could be listed on the Canadian exchange somehow, which I don't know how the fuck that's legal, dude.
Well, here's something that you're investing in a company where half of the population, maybe more than half of the population, can't use that product. You know what I mean? Why would you do that? It just doesn't make any sense. Federal law says cannabis consumption is illegal, right? Who in their right cotton picking mind would say that's a stock that I'm going to buy? Come on, guys. Come on, man. Let's just call it for what it is.
Oh boy, there was a couple. I got a couple here left on my list here, Devon. We're getting towards the end, but I got there was a quote here. You said the entire hemp industry in Maryland was set up to fail, and I was hoping maybe you would give us some examples of why you believe that.
Man, I not too long ago, a couple of months back, I went to speak with a gentleman who owned a vape shop, and he was just sitting around waiting for the end to come, because especially after the passage of our well, we just got legal cannabis in Maryland for adult use. There was a referendum here recently. Correct. Right? When that referendum passed, because they put it to referendum, and when that referendum actually passed, everyone in hemp sort of realized what had just happened. It meant that the people who were selling Delta 8, which was the product that was keeping the hemp industry afloat, would now pretty much end up having to close up shop. And why? Because they knew that in the end, the marijuana industry was going to win, and they did. So I went and spoke with this guy, and he was just sitting around. He was like, honestly, man, I'm just waiting for July 1st so I can just close up my shop and move on. And there are so many people that I know in the Maryland hemp space who invested their entire life savings in dispensaries.
Which I
And
never recommend, by the way.
people,
But I get it.
look, yeah, they took a shot. They thought that we're going to get out here and we're going to ride this green wave and we're going to do XYZ into order of ABC, and it just didn't pan out that way. But that's just the way that industry is, man. When there was a time when everyone thought that AOL was going to dominate the internet.
Forever.
What happened? Things changed.
VHS thought they had it on lock.
Hey, remember Blockbuster? What happened? Redbox.
Yeah.
Yep. Things change, and industries evolve. And the people who invested early on in Maryland's hemp industry, especially when they came for Delta 8, the writing was on the wall then. The writing was on the wall. And the moment that they began to constrict the access to Delta 8 while expanding access to Delta 9 via the dispensaries, via the adult use market. People saw that it was going to end, and that's what produced that thought in my mind that, man, this industry was given it was given a self-destruct date, basically. And they're guys like Nick Patrick, who's a heck of a great guy, smart guy, really sharp guy, closing up his shop because it's just inevitable, man. It had to happen.
I think Connecticut's dealing with something similar right now. They just snuck something sneaky.
That's the evolution. I think the ganja guys, the marijuana guys, are whispering in the ears of the politicians, and Delta 8 has done itself a great disservice by showing up in gas stations and ending up in lunchbox of kids who are below age. Delta 8 shot itself in the foot, and once the government came for Delta 8, it pretty much pulled out the IV that was keeping the hemp industry alive. If you speak to him, someone who owns it, if you pull exactly, this just pulls it right out, and I feel for those guys, but I never felt comfortable enough with the day that I realized that I could walk into a bodega and buy some Delta 9 THC. That said to me, this is going to be trouble. Can you see me?
It's getting dark. I didn't want to cut you off, but yep, you're going to be a shadow in a second.
I'm sorry, man.
Do you have a light out there? It's okay.
Let me just turn the light on real quick.
Yeah, cool. If you got a light, I got 2 more questions.
Okay.
I didn't want to leave you sitting in the dark all night, but
this is
if you like to.
I sit out here with my dog, Pierre, and
it'd be kind of fun. It's like shadowy, it's mysterious, It's like,
pardon? Yeah.
Gives it a little ambience, like shit.
Yeah.
Man, there we go.
I just realized I looked at myself and whoa, I've disappeared.
I was wondering if you would notice. Well, what do we got? I got 2 left here. One of them I think we should definitely do. The other one I'm up in the air about, but social equity is on my list. And obviously we've seen this in state after state. I listened to a lot of the talk here when they were dealing with the rollout, and I would like to hear your thoughts on the social equity idea.
It's social equity is one of the sweetest sounding slogans you could imagine. You know, it sounds great, but once you look at what's underpinning it, there's actually nothing to support it. Um, I have an idea though, you know, and it's different. You know, people think of social equity as one specific thing. You know, providing a license to to an individual who's had, you know, interaction with the law enforcement at one time. You know, that's one aspect of it. But if social equity can be far more impactful, right? If you think about it, you find out where the children of the people who have been incarcerated are going to school. Use money from cannabis to fund programs at those schools that are cannabis related. Okay, what do I mean? You have all this money coming from taxes and fees. Spend a little at maybe a community college or maybe a HBCU to create a course to teach how to um, test for cannabis, to test for jobs in the future cannabis industry. You know, have courses that teach how to, well, you know, it doesn't really matter what. The thing is, those resources from cannabis can be directed towards academic institutions to benefit the children of the people who were once arrested for. I mean, because there are so many people who paid spent time behind bars due to, you know, possession or trafficking or whatever the case may be. But if they're nonviolent, you can find out where their kids are going to school and use the resources from the industry to actually benefit those children. Why? Because that's a different way to actually make use of social equity. It sounds great, and it has more of an impact that way because you're impacting more lives if you're teaching people how to do stuff.
And you know, I was one of those kids. My dad went to jail for smuggling hash, and that would have been tight if they just paid off my student loans with weed money. or something. I really like that because instead they talk about education a lot, right? We're going to use some of these taxes for education, but in Vermont, for example, up to $10 million a year out of the excise tax goes to Department of Health to fund their education, which is still very much fear-based misinformation, kind of reefer madness from the Stone Age, man. And that's not education. That's not helping anybody, in my opinion.
No, it's not. And you think about it, like a lot of the individuals, I can't really say that because I don't know. I don't have the statistic, but I could imagine a scenario where a lot of the kids of people who have served time for cannabis related offenses, they're not going to UMBC. They're not going to University of Maryland. Those places have money, you know. They're not going to Towson. They're not going to Loyola, but they will end up at BCC. I mean, Baltimore City Community College. They may end up at Morgan. They may end up at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. They may end up at an HBCU. So those places can use money too, man. So if you're going to talk about social equity, there you go. I'm giving you an idea. Use cannabis money to benefit. If you want to say we're endorsing education, we're supporting education, we're supporting, you know, communities of color who've been impacted by cannabis. But there you go. You've got it. There you go. I've given it to him in a silver platter. Do it that way.
I love it. Let me run this by you because this was an interesting question that I interviewed a lawyer up in Vermont. His name's Tim Fair from Vermont Cannabis Solutions.
One more thing, Caleb. Testing, cannabis labs. If you have a question, if all cannabis tests can be done at a chemistry lab in almost any high school. I mean, any university. The labs are sophisticated enough to do that. Yeah. So if you want, you can have a contract with that circulates from school to school. Have one with Morgan for 5 years, UMES for 5 years, local HBCUs for 5 years to conduct testing. and you pay the students in those labs to do the testing, to test for you. When you pull the stuff off the shelves, you know, to test what's in the
Sure.
cannabis oil,
Yeah.
you can use the labs at the universities for that and pay them. Pay them.
And
You
I
want
think
social equity?
some of
There
that
you
is
go.
in the. I have
There
seen
you
a
go.
couple contracts with some schools. One of them was in Georgia. Yeah, there are some companies that are lining up to do something
It's
very similar.
very smart.
I think
I'm
it's a
sorry to
little.
interrupt you.
I think no. I think it's a little opportunistic on their part,
Well,
also. But it's also smart business. It looks good, and it is kind of a fucking great idea. You know,
it is opportunistic,
a win-win.
but it's smart.
Right,
It's
exactly.
everyone benefits.
Hey, sure.
Everyone benefits.
Sure. And so okay, so let me ask this question before I forget, because Tim Fair here raised a very interesting point that I haven't heard anyone say. And he said, we were talking about social equity, and he said, what about social equity for the people who are negatively impacted by the war on drugs, who have no interest in getting into the cannabis industry? He said, not every Black person who got in trouble for weed or has their life impacted by weed wants to sell
Exactly.
weed. So what about
Exactly.
all those other people who, because like if this thing negatively impacted your life, maybe you're not chomping at the bit to get involved in something that's negatively impacted. Maybe you want to stay the
Right.
fuck out of it. Like what about that thought, Devon?
See, as I was saying, it dovetails right back into what I was saying before. You think about it. Using um, resources acquired from the cannabis industry and funneling that money back into academic institutions where people who have been impacted by cannabis are attending those schools, you're going to impact those lives. It doesn't, even if it's, just, even if you're providing an academic scholarship for someone who wants to be a journalist, you know, you can find those people because they're there. You know what I mean? You can, exactly. There you go.
Yes, please.
You could have had, look, if people were just a little bit creative, as you said, not everybody wants to be in this crazy industry. Some people want to stay away from it, and that's not a bad idea. But
I don't blame them at all.
right, man, it's a difficult space, and you have to love it, and you have to have a reason and a passion to want to be here. But as you're saying, not everyone does. There are people who
Well,
have been impacted who want
That was
nothing
Tim
to.
saying that.
Hey, he's right, and he's right.
I
You know, you can find those people, give them a scholarship.
You hear that? Give me a scholarship.
Give them a scholarship, man. Somebody wants to be an English major, give them a scholarship to study English at a university. If you know, and extra points for sending them to an HBCU or a community college.
Yeah. Or what about if they gave everyone their shit back that they stole through the civil asset forfeitures?
I don't know about that.
Well, it's
I don't
not
know
going
if
to
that's ever
happen.
going to happen. Yeah,
No,
exactly. We're
that
talking
money's
about
gone.
things that are realistic, and you know,
Sorry, I like to daydream down.
man. If I mean, these guys love to talk about education, how much they support education. Well, this gives you an opportunity to actually do it. Be about it, man. There are schools that need money. There are schools that need, you know, a university will never say no to cash. None of them,
True.
right? None of them. If you give them money, they'll say, "Do you got any more?" Right?
If you give a mouse a cookie, he'll probably ask for a glass of milk.
Give it. Just look. These schools need the cash. These schools are educating the kids that have been impacted by cannabis. There you go. Give the money to the schools.
I love it.
You know where they're going to school, man. You do know, right? Some kid whose dad was jammed up for a couple of years, you know, for selling cannabis. Are they going to end up at? Are the odds that they're going to end up at UMBC or Johns Hopkins? Or do you think that the chances are that they're going to end up at a community college, local community college, if they if they matriculate at all?
Sure.
You know where they're going to end up. Direct the resources there. If you want to call it social equity, do something. That's all.
Love it. I love it.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. I got one more for you, Devin. I'm at the end of the list here, but you made one final point, and I think we may have touched on this a little, but I thought it was a good quote, so I'm going to read this as my closer here. You said the only people who are being set up to win on this bet is the government.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You think about it. You create an industry with incredibly high costs of entry, right? Then you tax the heck out of them. All the while, there's this quiet, really super successful illicit industry, shadow industry right in the background. They're doing their thing quietly, making, doing quite well, and you're not going after them, right? So you're setting up an industry to compete with another industry that's selling the same product at a lower cost. Explain to me how that makes sense, right? So how
is that rhetorical? I hope.
Right. You think about it, Caleb. If I'm selling widgets for $5 and you're selling widgets for $2, why are you going to come and see me for my $5 widget when you can go get a $2 widget?
It better be a good fucking widget.
It better be excellent to be 250 times the cost, right? 250. Yeah. Come on, man. You're charging them more to do the same thing while a shadow industry exists that's providing the exact same service. And what do you do with that money that you take? What do you do with it? I don't know. You talk about social equity, and there are so many opportunities and options for you to actually be about the business of doing that, and yet nothing gets done.
Well, to me, man, when I started, one of the first things that stuck out to me when I went to a control board meeting was how much they were using a phrase. It was repeated so ad nauseum
because it sounds good.
It
sounds
feel
wonderful.
Almost, and it's like repetition, and then it's like, oh, when you actually read the language in the bill, like especially in Vermont, they're like, say for in Vermont, right? Vermont is they said if you're Black or Hispanic, you automatically qualify. Well, look at our demographics. It's 98% white here. It's like, okay, so you automatically qualified like the smallest possible percentage of our population, and then of those, how many of them have the money to actually start a business? How many of them want to start a business? And now you've taken 100% of our population, carved it down to 2%, and then carved out the people who don't have the money and the people who aren't interested. And what's left? You're not helping that many people, really.
So what they're saying is, we tried. That's what they can say. We tried. We tried to help, but nobody took us up on our offer. You're not looking at creative ways to actually make that work, because as you said, man, not everybody wants to be in this industry.
Sure.
But they've been impacted. Yeah. There's a way to get them their share. There's a way to do it. You just have to be creative.
The creative solutions, you're right. Maybe if we didn't have so many goddamn lawyers and fucking police in the regulator seats and, all of these, criminal justice judges and lawyers and the same politicians who got us into this mess now are like, oh, we're going to come in and save the day. It's like, no, man, where are all the growers? Where are all the people who actually know about?
Exactly. You look at the people who, you can tell these regulations and laws are written by people who have no idea about this stuff. Zero.
Yes, you can.
Zero.
It's painful. It was painful to watch. I watched a lot of the advisory meetings and the control board meetings, and I kind of like the members of the control board, but the consulting firms, I was like, I do not like these guys at all. This is a grift right here. We got a bunch of alcohol guys. We got a bunch of former regulators who fucked up their state, and now they're getting paid to fuck up our state. It's just, this is wild. Yeah. And not, out of all of these people on the control board and the advisory committee, there's 17 people. I don't think a single one of them grew weed. A couple of them worked for dispensaries that were sold out to MSOs from out of state. They got a couple of seats on the board.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Committee, sorry, but
you know,
none of the local growers or the guys who show up constantly, or like John Rogers, who's literally helped write S-54, which was the legalization bill. He's a hemp farmer. He was a senator for 8 years. He was a House representative for 8 years, and he grows hemp, and he's lived here his whole life, and he wrote the fucking legislation. He applied for a job on the control board, didn't even get an interview.
Wow, unreal. And that's the kind of talent that you need to actually make it work, man.
Yep.
But you've got to really wonder what the regulators see as a future for this industry. Do they see it as something that's potentially viable, that can actually benefit and sustain a consumer base, an educated and informed consumer base? Or is it just a slush fund that they're going to continue to tap and raid until it just collapses and dies? And they'll say, okay, we gave it a shot.
Yeah, and then they'll get promoted to some
know.
other agency. They'll failing up seems to be it's just wild. And sometimes I think, my personal opinion, I'll throw it in a little. I think some of these people are just using this as a stepping stone to get access to other, promotions down the line, other government jobs. And this is just a convenient way to and it just sucks listening to people who clearly don't know shit about weed. And I'm not a fucking expert, but you can tell I don't need to be an expert to know when someone is clueless. I just have to know slightly more than them.
And to go back, just to circle back to what you're saying about, only the government being set up to actually succeed in this.
That was your quote.
Yeah, that's my quote, and I'm sticking with it. But there's another group, C-suiters for MSOs. Those guys lost billions and billions of dollars, but they're getting these really sweet compensation packages. How do you get paid so damn well to do so poorly? And and what purpose does a board serve, and whose interests are they acting in if they allow companies to just burn through so much cash and treat them as if they're actually running a profitable business?
Sure.
I was thinking earlier, man, there has to be a way to if you made CEO base pay or C-suite base pay some multiples of the average employee of the corporation, that's their base. So if there's like a $50,000, average payment for all the employees average, then you multiply that by maybe 4 or 5, so their base pay is $200,000.
That's what I was kind of thinking. That seems more reasonable.
And then stock options. Only if the company is doing well can they make any money beyond their base pay. So they're stuck with their base pay, and if the company performs well, they can make more. If the company does what all these other companies doing, all they get is their base pay.
Sure.
So these people are making a lot. I was looking at something someone posted the other day about the executive pay for, I think it was Canopy or Acreage or one of them.
I think it was Rob McPherson on LinkedIn.
It may have been. It may have been Rob.
I got to get Rob on the show. Yeah, go ahead. And
it was absolutely stunning to see that they were making so much money, all the while riding this company into an iceberg like the Titanic, and they sank it.
And we still see all these mass layoffs all over the place. It's like these companies scale up instead of back in the day, if you wanted to start a business, right, you'd have to learn how to grow weed, and then you would have to find people to buy it, and then they would have to enjoy it and come back and buy more, and then you build up a customer base, and then you can scale a little. But these guys do the opposite. There's here's $50 million. We're going to build the biggest facility we can. We're going to scale up without necessarily having the customer base or the demand for our product. and we're gonna just we're just gonna jump into the industry on the top rung of the ladder and just try to squash everyone. And it's ridiculous. Like
Absolutely.
I hate that as a business model.
See, but you know what? And it's just indicative of the fact that these people have very little understanding of what the cannabis. Someone described this industry as like a massive counterculture, and that is the most appropriate description that I've ever heard. Why? Because it's unlike any other industry. You know, think about what cannabis consumption or a cannabis-based community was like. You know, when I was a kid, and the few times that I ever smoked cannabis, you did it with your friends, and you shared the experience. You know, you took a puff and you passed it to your guy on the left. Your guy took a puff and he passed it to the guy on the left, and somehow it would end up back to you. That's not what these guys or gals are about. They're not about sharing. They're not about building a community. They're about getting in, dominating everyone, squashing the little guy, and rolling out with a bag of cash. Too bad they didn't understand that that's not how this industry works. It's just different.
Yeah, and you know, like they tried to do it like widgets. They were like, this is just like making widgets, but you nailed it on the head. They're not, you know, they're not friendly. You know, the weed culture is exactly right. Like pass it, like
it's different, man.
Like if you had some and
yes.
I didn't have some, then I had.
You come over and you look. If your boy had and you didn't have, you had, right?
Exactly.
That's not how these guys think.
And that was
that's
the beauty.
Why they're not going to win, bro. That's why they can't win, because they don't understand the culture. It's one of sharing. It's one of community. It's one of looking out for the others. These guys,
and these finance goons and these private equity guys, they're not really. That's not really their style.
No. So it always interests me that I'm getting, you know, connect requests from capitalists, you know, from venture capitalists, you know. That isn't if when it's time to scale this thing, look, depending on what the time horizon for federal legalization looks like, if I'm ever going to build this thing, it's going to be crowdfunded. I'm going to go to people because I don't want to be beholden to the rules, regulations, and machinations of venture capitalists.
Once they get their hooks, and they just fucking
yes, yeah. You go from being Pinocchio. You go. It's the reverse of Pinocchio. You go from being the little boy to the wooden puppet. You know what I mean? You're not longer. You're no longer right. You know what I mean? That's what the venture capitalists do, man.
Reverse Pinocchio.
Reverse Pinocchio. Pinocchio's dream was to go from being a block of wood to being a little boy, right? With the reverse Pinocchio, you go from little boy to a puppet, and that's what venture capitalists do. They turn you into the reverse Pinocchio.
I've never heard that phrase. You know, Devon, I think that might be a nice place to leave it. I'm going to flash your business logo up there one more time. Devon Ledford, Baltimore, Maryland, 14 parishes. However, I always leave the last word for my guests. So if there's anything we missed or you have any shameless plugs or shout outs, I always like to give my guests a little bit of time to air those out. And I want to just say thank you so much. This has been fantastic, Devon.
Wow. I just want to say, yeah, I a couple of years ago, I couldn't do this, you know, because I mean, my anxiety was just insane and I just couldn't pull this off. But I discovered CBD. It's helped a lot. And my daughter actually takes it as well for her anxiety. So yes. As far as shout outs, I just want to shout out to all of the really, really super cool people I've met on LinkedIn platform. You guys are really, really sharp. I respect you guys so much. I look forward to learning so much more about cannabis from you guys because and I just want to say this also. If I make start a thread and I make a mistake, please feel free to comment. and tell me how I messed up. You know,
I'll be the first one to try it.
I am not the kind of guy who takes these things personally. You know what I mean? And I truly believe that if you're never wrong, you never learn. So if someone is able to point out something that I may have gotten wrong and show me where the correct way to look at it is, I appreciate you. So please, please, these are conversations we're having. Join me and we could all teach each other. And that's basically how I want to end out here.
Beautiful.
Man.
Devon, Ledford, 14 Parishes, Baltimore, Maryland. I am your host, Caleb Teskey, reminding you that the devil is in the details and the details are in the fine print.